This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. And this show is brought to you through the support of our sponsors, like, where the hell is that? Where is this? What's going on here? Okay, cartking.com. This is getting a little creepy here. Cart-king.com, 877-986-7771. If you've ever thought about going into the mobile cart or kiosk business, you want to sell coffee, food, magazines, souvenirs, those cell phone cases, flowers, from a cart or a kiosk in a mall, in a shopping center, in the lobby of the motor vehicle, DMV. You know, it's a great business. You go into the DMV, make keys in front of the DMV. Or, you know, anyway, let's get into it. Cartking.com. Whatever kind of business you're getting into, Cartking.com has been building these carts and kiosks for any application, indoors, outdoors, heavily secured. Those carts you see outside the Little League field there selling hot dogs and hamburgers and souvenirs. Cart-king.com. You go to the website, cart-king.com. You check out the different styles and models that they have. They'll custom design it for you, they'll custom build it for you, and they'll ship it worldwide, no matter where you live. And then what you do is you get a hold of me and you say, hey, Ed, I bought one of these carts. I'll give you a lifetime membership of our Opperman Report members section. And on top of that, I'll even plug your new business on the show. I'll give you a plug. Might even do a little quickie, little 5-minute interview with you. And describe your business there. We're trying to sell these carts, guys. Okay, we're trying to sell some carts and kiosks. The CartKing.com guys paid us a year in advance to help my daughter get to college. So we really owe them our support and our gratitude. Cart-king.com, 877-986-7771. Pure Soap Flake Company is another one of our great sponsors. Christine over there is the head flake at Pure Soap Flake Company. You can give her a call at 218-568-2525. You can find their products at puresoapflake.com, at amazon.com, at greenhome.com, or you can walk into Whole Foods and say, hey, where do you keep that Pure Soap Flake products? They're kinds of living creatures and sensitive skin. If you want to, because they make laundry soap, bar soap, and then soap to clean your pots and pans and wash your countertops with. And all three are excellent, man. They're free of fragrance and chemicals. They use organic vegetable oil, and they're made of pure soap. They're free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium oil sulfate, and synthetic additives. So trust me, you use this bar soap on your body, you're going to feel great. It smells great. You use this laundry soap on your clothes feel great. You got no chemicals in your clothes. And then you can scrub your pots and pans with this stuff. It comes out great. AlmightyGold.com. Gold! AlmightyGold.com. Why save in paper when you can save in gold? AlmightyGold.com understands it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. No one can afford an ounce of gold. That's why Almighty Gold has introduced the Carat Bars, a reliable company where you can buy gold in minor quantities for as little as 1/10 of a gram. That's like $6. And each of these gold bars is inserted into a Carat Bar frame. which is a standard credit card size and covered by a safety laminate. It's imprinted with a unique DNA, and there's a black lit authenticity signature on the front, so you know it's authentic. AlmightyGold.com, they have a cryptocurrency that's backed in gold. And also, too, you can get into the gold business yourself. You can go to AlmightyGold.com and for free, sign up as an affiliate, get your affiliate link, post that link online. Anybody that clicks on that link and purchases some gold, you're going to get a commission on it. Go to emailrevealer.com, get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But even if you don't want to be a PI, the first chapter of that book is a little bio of my life. People are always interested in my life. I get hundreds of emails a day asking me about my life. So you can buy the book. You don't have to email me. How's that? Huh? That sounds like a good deal for both of us, doesn't it? Emailrevealer.com. Then also, too, it gives you a lot of tips and tricks in life. You want to locate people. You want to hire a PI. You want to locate where someone works or their place of employment, their assets, all kinds of fascinating tips and tricks, and you can live the life of a PI. Also, how to get licensed in different states. In some states, that don't require licensing. Did you know that? Emailrevealer.com. And also, too, besides the book, we do asset searches, locates, email tracing, online infidelity investigations, adoption investigations, judgment recovery. We'll help you out. Any kind of problem you got, man, give us a call over there at emailrevealer.com. We'll be glad to help you out. Okay, my first guest today is a former private investigator. He's a publisher now. He's escaped the PI world. He's got away from there. Joseph Green. Is this the same Joseph Green from the Reservoir Dogs and the bank robbery?
Yes, naturally. You found me out right away.
Yeah. No, I should have called you Mr. Green. I'm sorry, Mr. Green. So, Mr. Green, are you there?
I am here.
Tell us about yourself. Who is Joseph Green?
Okay. So, I'm a writer and researcher. I was part of the Coalition on Political Assassinations. I was on the charter. John Judge was my mentor for many years until his death. I'm currently part of the Hidden History Center. I'm part of the Center for Deep Political Research. I'm also a publisher at Say Something Real Press, and I'm general playwright, screenwriter, hyphenate, generally researcher. And
your website is joegreenjfk.com. You can check them out there.
Yeah, the main one is joegreenjfk.com. If you get there, you can kind of find everything else. But that has a bunch of articles that I've written over the years for my own site and for Jim Diogenio's website and Who, What, Why, and all, Steam Shovel Press, all sorts of places.
All the usual suspects, right?
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. How did you get involved in all this?
It was really, it's kind of funny because it's a long story. I'm going to make it short. Basically, 9/11 happened. When that happened, it was everything involved in that was so spectacularly wrong, that I got interested in this whole thing. So I was late to the party. And then I got hired by this guy who wanted to make an independent film that touched on the Kennedy conspiracy. And he gave me a couple of books to read. And I read those books. And I'd grown up as an academic. My father's a professor. And so in my mind, conspiracy theories were always just kind of, okay, kind of this, it's like a cultural manifestation, not a real thing. But then I read these books and I thought, this is actually pretty well good. And then I got hooked and I got interested, and then I realized that, history is a lie and you have to dig into everything. And anyway, it's kind of what happens to everybody. You dig into this one thing, and then all of a sudden you discover that everything else you've been told your whole life isn't true, and you got to go in and find out what the heck happened.
And you were hired as a private investigator to work on this film?
No, I was hired as a screenwriter. I wrote a screenplay for him. I'm a writer. I write plays and all kinds of stuff, short stories, whatever. So I've been hired at various times to work on films or work on plays of my own, and that sort of thing. I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Private investigative work came out of the fact that I was also to get insurance all these years. I worked in casualty. So I was a casualty examiner for a long time, people that get very, very badly injured in accidents. And then I had experience with casualty litigation, that sort of thing. And they needed somebody who understood medical fraud. So this company hired me to be a private eye. So I did that for a couple of years.
Okay, gotcha. Now, I guess the kids call it today. They call it getting woke. You're woke, right? And I guess you got woke over 9/11. Do you regret getting woke? You know what I mean?
No. I mean, but it certainly had social costs.
Yeah.
Because you end up, I end up not talking a lot of the time. Like if you're in mixed company, and somebody says something, I just kind of let it go because I know that A, no one wants to hear this, and B, only negative things are going to come out. If you're just at somebody's social occasion and you start saying things that what's going to sound crazy to them because they haven't done any of the work. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, but I was always going to do this because I was the kid who, read every book that he could get his hands on. So it was just, this was always going to happen, I think. I was really into the counterculture anyway, and it was inevitable. It was just that what happened, what the real difference is, and I wrote about this actually, is that one of the things that academia trains you to do, basically, is to put things into categories. So I had encountered, like, for example, Oliver Stone's film JFK. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was brilliant, extremely well done. But looking at the film, it was an example of conspiracy theories being put into another format, by a filmmaker. And I could talk about the social resonance of it and all those, but never actually take anything that it's saying seriously as a serious statement because I'd already put it into a category. And so it took 9/11 for me to stop putting things in categories and start looking at the epistemology part of it. In other words, saying that these are true statements, or these are potentially true statements, rather than simply examples of a certain type of discourse. So I had to get to that point where I could go, oh, Jesus, this is all real. Like, this isn't, some academic thing where we're, organizing what type of books or what type of media. This is a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you, man. I hear you. Now,
it was not, I mean, the first time I talked about this kind of thing with my dad was saying, where are you getting all this ideology from? Which is sort of perfect in a way, because that's what it sounds like to someone who has studied. It's like, oh, it's ideology. You've gone down this rabbit hole. And I said, no. These are true things. These are go look them up. These are factual statements. And you have to go into that, but you have to teach somebody to think a whole different way, in essence.
Yeah, and so much of these revelations that we learn goes against our ideology. It kind of conflicts with our ideology. That makes us open up our eyes a little further and kinds of sees the things we believe so strongly. Our patriotism, these kind of things, are just the opposite of what.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, like if you were telling a real history of the United States after World War II, the name Reinhard Gehlen should be a strong, should be a central figure. But nobody's heard of Reinhard Gehlen, because that whole, Project Paperclip and all that, generally speaking, people are totally unaware of those things. And yet one guy had this oversized effect on all of our foreign policy since then. It's incredible, but people don't know it. You have to start from scratch.
Yeah, and even if people have heard of Operation Paperclip, they only know of it as it applies to NASA, and not applies to Food and Drug Administration and all different kind of agencies here that took over our government, our policies here.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, if people know that much, terrific.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's a whole. It's just, you got to get out the shovel. You're just at the level of the surface. Knowing that stuff, you got to go in and find out what really happened, and that actually ties into all sorts of other things that went on, including the Kennedy assassination, and everything else.
What do you make of these kids today that everything's a false flag and the smart meters are causing fires in California? And,
Yeah. You know, what John Judge used to say is, I don't live in the matrix.
Yeah.
You know, you have to look, what is the evidence? You know, what actually happened? What can we account for? And he was deeply suspicious of kind of sci-fi explanations for things. You know, on the other hand, technology being what it is, I mean, are these things possible? I mean, I suppose they are. The thing that worries me about it is that if you have a generation of people who have become accustomed to looking at the world from the lens of like video games and virtual surroundings, in a way, you're kind of teaching yourself to look at reality through the lens of these virtual surroundings. And therefore, maybe it becomes more plausible that, you know, you can magically, have holographic planes or something on 9/11 or whatever, whatever the case may be.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
I take all that stuff with a big grain of salt. I would like to see some documents. I would like to see some witnesses. I would like to see hard evidence for all of these claims. But the fact that there are sometimes false flags or what are really false sponsorship operations doesn't mean that everything is a false sponsorship operation.
Yeah, and it's really concerning today, too, that we have these YouTube stars and Twitter stars pretty much just regurgitating the same stuff back and forth, watching each other's videos and reading each other's tweets and just expanding on it, and just having to one-up each other with a deeper, more scary theory.
Right, exactly. And it becomes like a branch of imaginative literature, which is, it's not good, obviously.
No, we're not going down a good road now.
What's that?
I says we're not going down a good road here.
No, I don't think. I think it is worrisome. It's like I kind of go back to things like, Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. That one of the problems, Neil Postman argued that if you're trying to get information, that television is not the way to go, because for various reasons, including just the biases of visual presentation, that people do not get information from television. Your brain goes into this passive state. I don't know if you're familiar with Jerry Nander's book, Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television. One of his arguments was that studies had shown that your brain goes into a passive state while you're watching something, which actually makes you remember less than if you are engaged in a book or text or whatever. And since YouTube, we're talking about the same thing, essentially visual presentations, they have all the same biases that the old televisual language had. So, I don't. But what are you going to do? I mean, on the other hand, getting people to read is just almost impossible these days.
Yeah, and now we have these smartphones, so people are watching these YouTube videos while they're sitting on the toilet. Where in the old days, at least you got away from the TV once in a while. You could walk outside. And now you can't get away from this at all. And there's no studies of how this is going to affect people. We haven't had these things for 15 years yet that we know what's going to happen to us. But anyway, I don't carry one of those phones.
Okay. It was just an editorial in the New York Times about how all the claims against 5G are, jimmied up, and of course 5G is fine. Everything. But he doesn't know that. Yeah. Nobody knows that. Yeah. It's a giant experiment. I mean, for good or ill, it's a giant experiment.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I invited you on the show, not to sit here and grumble with me about kids today, which we've gotten into here. A couple of old PIs that we're looking for.
Well, no, but I'm very to the youth, though. I mean, I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about. It's that some of these things are unfortunately translated into that YouTube culture.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. My own daughter, she's going off to college in a couple of weeks. I'm so impressed with this kid. Her, brilliance, and activism and stuff. So I see these kids out there. They're doing great stuff too as well. Their friends and stuff on the debate team. But I invited you on the show to talk about this guy, Dan Mitrione. Now, I just heard the name for the first time last week. I had Ren Craig on the show. We were talking about the Jonestown. And then my friend Alan Lilly said, hey, man, you want to know about Dan Mitrione? Talk to Joseph Green. So who is Dan Mitrione?
Dan Mitrione. Okay. So in the popular culture, at least in the 70s, he was probably known because the director Costa Gavras made a film called State of Siege that was about Dan Mitrione. Yves Montand, the French actor, played him. And the movie dramatized the fact that Dan Mitrione's death, and his death grew completely out of his life. It was sort of, if you believe in karma, then you believe that this is a perfect situation. It is a circle. Mitrione was a guy who was born in 1920. His career goes something like this. He served in World War II in the Navy. He became a police officer. He became the chief of police in Richmond, Indiana. And Richmond, Indiana, historically, is kind of interesting because in the 1920s, there were more members of the Ku Klux Klan in Richmond, Indiana than any place else in the United States. There were something in the order of 300,000 members in the region, and they had infiltrated all parts of the state of Indiana, politicians, the police, everything. And by the time he was right after the war, things had not changed all that much. And then in 1959, he joined the FBI. The big thing, though, was that in the 60s, he became part of this U.S. State Department operation called the International Cooperation Administration. Okay. And you got to watch these names because they're very Orwellian. Mm. The International Cooperation Administration, what are they talking about? They were talking about the cooperation of other countries with our policies. Okay. How do you get sort of leftist radicals in line? And what Mitrione was famous for was advanced counterinsurgency techniques. He was the guy you sent to teach police officers in other countries counter-guerrilla warfare, specifically torture. Torture was his big thing. He used electrodes. He would put them in people's mouths. He put them on their genitals. He tortured homeless people just so that he could demonstrate the techniques to the police. And that's the one I got interested in. Is he was a child of Jones. Later led Jonestown. And that's a whole story of its own. And it's very interesting because, for example, when Dan Mitrione was in Brazil, Jim Jones was also in Brazil. And Jim Jones came back home. When he came back to the United States, he had a bunch of money from somewhere that we don't know where he got it. but he appears to have been running in the same circles as Mitrione more or less his whole life. And since the things that we know about Jones, including his CIA connections, it's very, very telling. So Dan Mitrione ended up in Uruguay, and he was doing the same thing he always does, which they would put him in charge of teaching the police how to deal with, quote unquote, guerrillas or insurgency, which are always leftists that are going against the established state government. And it goes into this pattern of what the United States was doing after World War II. Because if you start looking into it, like, for example, a great place to look for this is a book by William Bloom called Killing Hope. And what Bloom does is he goes and says, okay, what are all the interventions that were done by the United States after World War II? And it just gives a few pages on each one. So this was who was in the state. This is who was going against it. This is what we did. And in every case, we are going in and propping up right-wing governments against their kind of leftist agitators. And the reason seems to be is that a stable dictatorship is easy to do business with and is also better for U.S. investment than socialist leaders who are attempting to provide for the infrastructure, for schools, for poverty. These programs don't do U.S. investors any good. So they like right-wing governments. Well, anyway, so Mitrione is teaching the cops how to torture people. And he has there are these videos that he would make. And he said, Mitrione said that the application of the right pain in the right place is the key to getting information out of people. But the other thing Mitrione said, he said that when you're torturing someone for information, it's a good idea to, even after you've gotten the information and you don't need any more information from this person, to go ahead and torture them some more so they get the idea that this is not a good idea to withhold. This is the state of mind of this person. Well, in Uruguay specifically, there was a leftist guerrilla group called the Tupamaros. And the Tupamaros they were an outgrowth of a political party in Uruguay called the Frente Amplio. They were modeled on the Unidad Popular, which was a party in Chile. And Chile, you may remember, in 1973, we participated in assisting the kidnapping of Salvador Allende. And there's those famous Henry Kissinger telegrams, make the economy scream, that whole thing. And so this is like, if you look at what happened in Chile, it's the same thing that happened in Uruguay. So anyway, I'm sorry, you had a question?
No.
Oh, okay. And what happened was that so Mitrione was kidnapped by the Tupamaros and apparently tortured, although there are disagreements about whether or not his body showed signs of torture. But in any event, he was held for several days. They had made demands to release people. The government said, no, we're not releasing these folks from the jail. And a few days later, Mitrione was found with 2 gunshot wounds in his head. And that was the end of Mr. Mitrione. But what he was effectively a tool of the state. And he came out of, and I think the sort of scope of his life, he lived to be 50, is very interesting because it models exactly what you would see from this sort of authoritarian personality type. He's coming from an area that is very right-wing in general, has a long history with the Ku Klux Klan, becomes a police officer, which also has ties to the Ku Klux Klan, becomes the chief of police, joins the FBI. We all know about the FBI. Then becomes involved in this Office of Public Safety through USAID, through the State Department, spends his life essentially teaching police departments in Latin American countries how to kill and torture insurgents, and then is himself killed, in 1969. It's an extraordinary story.
Now, we might want to take a commercial break here, but when I get back, I want to ask you, how did it come about that Frank Sinatra and Jerry Lewis, did they know this guy? What? How did that whole thing come about that this guy here, whose business is torture, has a career in torture, or what? Like, just back in those days, we just kind of thought, well, torture's a good thing. We like torture, But let's take a little commercial break. We're here with Joseph Green. He's a former private investigator, he's a publisher. His website is joegreenjfk.com. So we'll be back with more of Joseph Green after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe add new point-of-sale locations across the country quickly, or bring in revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services to your office building, warehouse, or lobby? CartKing.com is the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, food carts, and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts in any application. That's www.cart-king.com. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. So you go to the website, CartKing.com, you check out their different designs and models. You pick out which design applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, and ship it worldwide. CartKing.com. PureSoapFlakes.com. 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at puresoapflakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
AlmightyGold.com. Get your gold in affordable quantities. 1 gram, 2.5 grams, 5 grams, no minimum purchase required. Why save in paper when you can save in gold? AlmightyGold.com understands it's difficult to afford gold in large quantities. No one can afford an ounce of gold. This is why Almighty Gold has introduced to you Carat Bars, a most reliable company where you can buy gold in minor quantities from as little as 1/10 of a gram. That's like $6. Each gold bar is inset into the Carat Bar frame, which is a standard credit card size, and it's covered by a safety laminate. It's imprinted with a unique DNA for counterfeit protection and provided with a blacklight authenticity signature on the front. Gold, AlmightyGold.com. They have a cryptocurrency backed in gold, and you can become an affiliate at AlmightyGold.com and make a commission from any gold that is purchased from your affiliate link. It's contact us at almightygold.com. That's their email address. Contact us at almightygold.com. Gold!
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Joseph Green, josephgreenjfk.com. fascinating guy, brilliant storyteller, man. I'm really enjoying this, Joe. Now, former private investigator, is a publisher. Now, before we get into Sinatra and Jerry Lewis, which is odd enough, okay? We can get to that in a minute. Now, when this kidnapping took place in Uruguay, right? Was this something that was in the news? Was it major news?
Yes, it was. But and that's actually the answer, I think, when we're talking about his Sinatra and Lewis had done this. They did this benefit for him after the fact. But you have to remember, so when it got publicized at the time, all that's told to the American people is this terrible, the Diplomados, this terrible leftist group kidnapped one of our righteous, employees and murdered, tortured him and murdered him. Yeah.
Yeah, they like to call them State Department.
Yeah, State Department official. Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But, it's also possible, and so this gets long and complicated, as you probably know, but the thing about a lot of these guys is that they also cross paths with Hollywood people a lot of the time. And in fact, so one of the key, when you start looking into the Bobby Kennedy assassination, one of the key figures of the Bobby Kennedy assassination, because he was the guy who sort of said what leads to follow and what leads not to follow, is a guy named Manny Pena. Okay. Manny Pena had been a CIA operative. He had been involved in operations in South America and probably was somebody that Dan Mitrione knew. They were working in the same area a lot of the times. And again, it's very hard to piece this information together. But Manny Pena also knew, Hollywood people. It's just the nature of Los Angeles. And so it's not entirely impossible that some of these folks, like, Jerry Lewis or something, might have at one point in time actually either met Mitrione or heard of Mitrione. And all these sorts of, these introductions, they would go something like, this is our friend, he's doing, work for the State Department. And like you said at the very top of the show, people come in with these patriotic principles. And the idea is if they're working for our team, then they must be doing good stuff. They don't tell, somebody, oh, this is the guy who puts electrodes on, those testicles. They say, this is the guy who works for the State Department. This is my friend. So that's how a lot of these things happen. And that's probably why Sinatra, it's in Sinatra's FBI file, I know, that he and Jerry Lewis had done this benefit for Dan Mitrione. But on the other hand, Frank Sinatra, he was a patriotic guy. He would have said, yeah, let's, we should help this. We should do this. I'm sure it would be an easy sell for him, I think.
Now, Jim Jones is portrayed as like a leftist, socialist, communist, left-leaning politics and stuff like that. When this all hit the news and Mitrione here was being kidnapped and stuff, do we have any record of Jim Jones making any statements acknowledging that he knew the guy?
Oh, no.
Nothing.
And so so Jim Jones, again, we go into this very weird area because Jim Jones started out as a very right-wing figure himself. He had worked to get out the vote for Richard Nixon. He had friends in the John Birch Society. And then he went to San Francisco. He became a friend of a guy named Timothy Stoen, who was the assistant district attorney of San Francisco. And when that happened, Jim Jones suddenly became a liberal, and he suddenly made contact with Rosalind Carter, Walter Mondale, Harvey Milk, the Governor Jerry Brown, the Willie Brown, George Moscone. And that Willie Brown, by the way, is the same Willie Brown who on 9/11 got a warning not to fly. You may remember that story.
Same Willie Brown that dated Kamala Harris?
Yes. And yes.
Gets
and
around,
so,
huh?
And then, yeah. This is what happens when you start going into this stuff, because everybody's connected to everybody else.
I know.
Well, George Moscone liked Jim Jones so much that he put him in charge of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission. Jim Jones didn't have a license. He had no education. He started out as a preacher. He grew up in a tent revival preacher home, where they would do speaking in tongues and snake dancing and all that kind of stuff. And he suddenly, like I say, managed to paint himself as a leftist and make all of these political contacts who gave him they gave him the keys of the kingdom. And one of the things I talk about in my zine that's so incredible is that and that certain things get erased. So when Jonestown happened, that is to say the alleged suicides of the 913 people at Jonestown, 9 days later, Harvey Milk and George Moscone were killed by Dan White. And that was treated as a Dan White, hated Harvey Milk and eventually became the Twinkie defense. He said he was on an overdose of sugar, and that's why he killed those guys. Well, the story was never picked up that George Moscone and Harvey Milk had deep ties to Jonestown. There are letters that are going back and forth between Harvey Milk and Jim Jones. There's money that's being funneled into Jonestown. And Harvey Milk and George Moscone wrote letters on behalf of Jim Jones. It started to come out, little stories. In fact, the Timothy Stone guy that I mentioned before, who was his buddy in the beginning, eventually got upset because his child had gotten lost in Jonestown, and he said this, they're brainwashing him and all this, such and such. He got mad about it, and they started to make some noise. And Harvey Milk wrote letters on behalf of Jim Jones saying, no, he's a great guy, and this Timothy Stone, you can't trust him. He's the former assistant district attorney of San Francisco, mind you. He's saying you can't trust this guy, and that Jim Jones is terrific.
Yeah, Harvey Milk had a teenage runaway boyfriend that no one talks about, living with him over there. It's totally whitewashed out of that story.
Yeah, well, it's amazing, and it takes a long time to sort of piece out, because there's all these strange things that are going on. But one of the things that comes up over and over again in the Jim Jones story is CIA involvement. In fact, the guy who actually purchased the land in Guyana was a CIA agent who put the money down to buy the property. And I go into the whole history of that part of Guyana, which it's a story of slavery, essentially, which is transmuted into another type of slavery in Jonestown. And the details of that are kind of long, and the history is kind of long. But one of the things that comes out of all putting the story of Dan Mitrione and the story of Jim Jones and where they intersect is a question that I ask in that zine is capitalism possible without slavery? Because it's never really been tried.
Fascinating. That's so true.
And in the modern era, the government has found new ways to create the conditions of slavery, both domestically and in foreign countries, without actually calling it slavery per se. And all this is connected to that, right? We're trying to keep control of these various countries to keep them in line so that they don't provide for their people in poverty, because that's bad for business. And then we also have to keep labor costs down all the time. So, and now we have the privatized prison phenomenon in the United States, where we're allowed to pay somebody pennies in prison to, answer calls for American Airlines or whatever. It's like
they're extremely creative at finding these new ways to exploit large numbers of human beings. And that exploitation runs through the entire history, and that's what I'm pointing to in all of this. That's what connects all of this, I think.
You mentioned before Guatemala. After the 54 coup in Guatemala, they turned over 40% of their land to the United Fruit Company. We wouldn't be getting all this cheap fruit, guys, if it weren't for that we were enslaving this other country, And that story is repeated everywhere. Yeah. That's what we're doing. It's always natural resources. That's what it was in Guyana. Like, why did Jim Jones put Jonestown in Guyana? Because that area, that land is very rich in mineral resources, bauxite, gold, all kinds of stuff. But the conditions are so horrible that nobody wants to live there. Mm. So we got to find some way to get this stuff out of the ground. Jonestown was an experiment to see if this is one way we can do it. And why do you think that experiment was aborted the way it was?
Why do I think what?
Why was that experiment aborted the way it was with the suicides or the death of 900 people? Why couldn't they just disband them, send them along their way, or come up with some other solution, a hurricane, a fire?
What happened was that a congressman, Leo Ryan, is the kind of politician they don't really make anymore. Mm. He went down to Guyana because he'd been hearing from his constituents that there was problems out there. So he gets in a plane and flies thousands of miles to this place. And he basically wouldn't take no for an answer. When he was there at Georgetown, which is the capital there, it's about 150 miles away from Jonestown, a guy tried to stab him, and he was stopped. And he still said, "No, I want to go see what's on the ground at Jonestown." Now, when he got there, when the plane pulled up, Leo Ryan became the first congressman there would be machine gunned to death on the tarmac. And I don't know whether that was a mistake or not. It's possible that was an error. Like, he was never, they didn't really mean, because that's pretty hard to ignore. If you just, the guy gets off the plane and you shoot him with a machine gun. So at that point, they may have thought the jig is up and we have to pull the plug on this. And that's a good question, because I am not sure whether, I am pretty sure that Leo Ryan is the instigator of how that whole thing fell apart. I'm not positive that killing him wasn't a mistake.
Mm. And I guess because they had those cameramen there, they couldn't just say, well, this is a plane crash, and just,
Right. Right. There's too many, it became too big at that point. There's too many witnesses, and there was already some heat on him. There had been, in fact, there was a female reporter that had been on to Jim Jones since he had been in Ukiah in California, because he had a camp set up in Ukiah in California, and he had put people who were considered insane, elderly people, and children in the same property, which you don't do that. And also, he didn't have any sort of mental health qualifications at all to do what he was doing. So, and people were disappearing. And in particular, enemies of Jim Jones were disappearing. And so a reporter got onto it, and she was eventually drugged, and she got off the case. She decided she didn't want to die, basically. And that whole story is in my zine as well. But so there were reporters there had been negative stories written about him before, and I think eventually it was going to come out. But Leo Ryan appears to have been the catalyst for the whole thing coming down at once.
Yeah, one of those other odd coincidences was OJ's mother worked at one of those mental institutions that Jones was recruiting these people from.
Exactly, and it's so wild. I know, and it's one of those things I have no idea what to do with that. Yeah, but it's very interesting.
And if you look into the whole youth of OJ too, in college and high school, trading girlfriends back and forth with Al Cowlings, the bizarre behavior his whole life, hanging out with J. Edgar Hoover, just one bizarre thing after another with OJ. What about there was other murders that took place after the Jonestown suicides? We'll call them suicides. But after that, up in San Francisco and California, there were other murders associated with this cult, right?
Yes, including Harvey Milk and George Moscone, I would say. But yes, absolutely. They became a cleanup operation at that point. And like one of the things I say again, and Jim Hogan also did some work on this. There were, as far as we can tell, there were no suicides at Jonestown. And the reason I can say that fairly confidently is that the local coroner said there were no suicides at Jonestown. So Dr. Mutsu testified in court that those people were murdered. So when people take cyanide, there are specific things that happen to the body. There's a kind of rictus grin and a stiffening, and those things were not observed in the bodies at Jonestown. Many people had kind of pinpricks on the cervical area, and a lot of them were just plain old shot. Now, one of the things that made it difficult, and this is usually when people are defending the official story, they'll say, well, it took several days for them to get at the bodies, and the bodies were left out in the sun. Military people, Viennese military, arrived and prevented anybody from getting at the bodies for several days. That's true. But the pathologist that examined the bodies did say that despite their condition, he was able to make this determination that these are not cyanide deaths. So the whole story, in other words, the whole don't drink the Kool-Aid and all that is nonsense. Yeah. Those people were murdered. They did not. It wasn't a cult in the way that you would think of, the way that people think of cults. People, become brainwashed and then willingly participate in this stuff. This was a slave camp. When the folks arrived in the planes that were brought in, they were tied up and then beaten before they ever went to work. And the huge percentage of the folks that were brought in were women and African American. So if you looked at and this is pointed out by John Judge in The Black Hole of Guyana, which is one of the greatest articles I've ever read. And it's actually the work of John Judge and Mae Brussel is really what got me into working on this whole Jonestown project in the first place. But something like 90% of the dead are black, and 80% of them are women.
And you can hear there's still audio tapes available today. You can find them on YouTube of Jim Jones' son torturing people, and this guy walked away with no consequences. Nothing happened to him whatsoever.
And that's a good question to ask. Why is that?
That's a good question. One little tidbit I'd like to share with you, because I had a friend who worked for the San Francisco Police Department who was in that building looking for Moscone, the shooter. No, it was Dan White. He was looking for the shooter, Dan White. And he talks about that Dianne Feinstein went on the air and did a live news report. And when the cops were running around trying to find this shooter, they were all dumbfounded and in shock that she was making these live pronouncements, that all this stuff on the air, that it totally sabotaged their hunt for this shooter. So take that for what it's worth. And but
that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know.
Yeah, no one ever talks about that. But I just happened to know the guy. We were just happened to be friends. Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you know the story about Jesse Jackson and Dr. King?
Yeah.
Dr. King assassination, when he put his hands in the blood.
Yeah.
And then went on TV and said, Dr. King told me with his dying breath that I'm going to take over, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost a parallel to what Feinstein was doing there. It's interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, we are. What do you want to leave us with? Is there something I haven't asked you? Because we got about 4 minutes left.
No, not really. Just the one thing that I've tried to do with all my work is I'm very much indebted to John Judge and Mae Brussel, and I try to in all my work to try to point people to those figures and Robert Cutler and some of the more obscure researchers that have a large breadth of work that I think is not, that people don't pay as much attention to it as they should, and they may be totally unaware of it. And so I try to point people to that. You can come up with some of that at the Hidden History Center. Also, this new magazine that S.D. Patrick is doing, Garrison, is trying to have that same breadth to go into, not just JFK or whatever, but to go into all the different aspects of hidden history that's kept away from us all the time. Because there was some great work that was done. I mean, one of the things about Mae Brussel, okay, a year before Jonestown exploded, Mae Brussel said on her show that she thought that they were training assassins in Guyana. Mae Brussel knows in real time what's happening. And it's fascinating. There's this new book out called Chaos that gets into the Manson thing, the fact that, Vincent Bugliosi was a conspiracy theorist. And he invented this whole crazy thing about Helter Skelter. And it's kind of, I'm excited that this book is out, and that there was another book called Revolution's End that Paul Krasner put me onto that is also very good. But it's taken 50 years for even the radical historians to catch up with what Mae Brussel was saying at the time.
Yeah, I just had Tom O'Neill on the show last week, and I have Dave Emery coming on next week.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Small world.
Matter of fact, me and Tom O'Neill, we were in the same business back in New York City. We both were in the handsome cab business, those horse and carriages that go around Central Park. Right around. Yeah. He actually knew what my horse looked like. He knew what he said on the air. He goes, "I remember that horse. I remember that carriage." So it's a small world.
Yeah.
And how can people find you besides JoeGreenJFK.com? Twitter, Facebook?
So Joe Green JFK. My Twitter is Joe Green JFK. So if you want to follow me on Twitter. But yeah, the hiddenhistorycenter.org, the Center for Deep Political Research has a Facebook page, which you can find, which has Richard Bartholomew, who you've interviewed, among others. And of course, Garrison Magazine is out, and it's a great looking magazine. It's one of the coolest things that I've ever been attached to. So people want to get some very high quality stuff, pick up a Garrison Magazine. It's available as a PDF and a hard copy, which is gorgeous. Very excited about that thing.
Yeah, Joseph Green, thank you so much, man. Anything you ever have you want to promote, just let me know, because you're a great storyteller. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, great. Thanks so much, Ed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Good night.
You bet. Take care.
Okay, that was Joseph Green, Joe Green, JFK.com. Check it out. He's a former private investigator, he's a publisher now. And we'll be right back after these messages. And now a word sponsor, Pure.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at puresoapflakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I want to thank Joseph Green, JoeGreenJFK.com. Great stuff. That's the kind of guy, I can just tell by talking to him. The first time I met him, by the way. But he's the kind of guy you can call up about just about any topic. any one of these topics, we're all the same people, talk about all the same stuff. Hey, Joe, what do you think it is? Oh, let me just go on for 2 hours and tell you a whole story and then just sit back and listen, which I love to do, by the way. I hate when you have to ask questions. I like to interrogate a guest, like just to get, or you have to guide them through the story. If I could just sit back and relax and listen, man, it's a good show for me. And I think the audience likes that too. So if you like today's show, check out OppermanReport.com. We have a members section there with over 200 shows, over 400 hours. It's like 220 shows. There's documents, there's videos, all kinds of content in there. Stuff you won't find anywhere else, man. We got more exclusive content than I think anybody else does. And that's how you support the show. By $6 a month, you become a member, or $20 a quarter, or $75 a year. If you want to help out, we're trying to get Victoria to college. So if you want to help us out and get a year's membership, and PayPal it to me. you can email me at oppermanreport@gmail.com, and I'll give you 13 months for $65, which is a nice discount. And we're going to need about 12 of those to cover the cost of the hotel and the rental car and all the stuff, these expenses, getting my beautiful daughter over to Washington, D.C. to start her college career. And then when I come back, I'm going to be hitting the ground running, guys. I'm going to have a lot more time to dedicate to this work, the work I do here for you. And the TV show. Looks like our TV show is picked up. We're getting the details on it on Monday. But it looks like that's a done deal. It just, depends on what they're offering me. I hate to have to turn it down. But I don't work for free, as people know. Okay, if you ever try to hire me, damn well Ed Opperman doesn't work for free, except for this radio show, which I do as a labor of love for my audience. I do love you guys very much. So if you want to help us out, get a membership, 13 months, $65. You email me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and help get Victoria Opperman to college. If you're already a member, we'll take a donation. We're short on money this month. We've got a lot of expenses coming up. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm negative in everything. I'm into the credit cards. I'm into the overdraft, everything. Trying to get all these funds together and the travel arrangements and all this stuff together to get my beautiful daughter off to college and start her new life, her adult life, And I'm so proud of this kid. You have no idea. So thank you so much. Hey, thank you, Alan Warren, who comes on before us here at 9 a.m. House of Mystery. Great stuff there with Alan Warren all the time. Thank you so much. Good night, guys. emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your